Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi guys, welcome back. Hopefully you're enjoying our episodes. Today we have Keslie Redel back, and she is, as you know, an autism specialist. She is also a board certified art therapist and a licensed clinical professional counselor. So many letters, right? But all that to say, Keslie is an expert in autism, and she's going to talk to us today about how to support our kids that have an autism diagnosis and what we need to put in place, how to help the schools, how to do lots of advocating. And with that, let's get to Keslie.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump into this. Okay, so we did a podcast with you about understanding the diagnosis of what autism might look like. And now we're going to say we have been diagnosed. Now, what do we do? So talk to me, like, now that we have this diagnosis of autism, what do you think are the supports that we need to put in place for our child?
Sure. So once again, it'll differ for every single kiddo. And I would say that we kind of can inform which supports we might want to look at based on whatever evaluation we had done, whatever testing we had done.
Sure.
And, you know, we might see that some kids need some speech therapy or some occupational therapy, things like that, as well as, you know, some mental health therapy could also be helpful, obviously. So the supports vary. And, you know, there's different organizations and agencies and things that can help us locate supports and services if those things are needed in the home. So, you know, we can certainly dive into that a little bit more later with some of our other questions if you want. But, you know, like I mentioned, the speech, the occupational therapy, mental health therapy, those are kind of the big ones, as well as some medication management, if that is something that, you know, the parents feel like would be helpful and the caregiver team and provider team feels like could be helpful.
Yeah. So that could be from a pediatrician if they feel capable of doing that, or it might be from a psychiatrist who is a specially trained doctor for mental health, medication management. Yeah. So, and also we might notice that we are going to need some supports probably within the school, right? And so there are different ways that can be met with either a 504 or an IEP plan, which the IEP is the individual education plan. And if you have questions about IEPs or 504 specifically, go back to Kayla Carney, who did our special education podcast, and listen to that, because she did a great job breaking down what that looked like and what special education is in the schools. But talk to us about what do you think that the schools can do for kids with autism? What can the schools do to help support our kids?
Sure. So most schools have school counselors, school psychologists. So kind of using them as a resource is going to be helpful in getting any sort of process started, as well as a school social worker, you know, with getting those educational plans in place. Also, you know, using those people in the school as a resource to really observe and gather information to help determine what might be helpful for your kiddo. And, you know, having these things in writing in the 504 plans or the IEPs is so important, because if it's not in there, your child might not be getting that support. And it helps kind of have benchmarks as far as like goals that you all develop as a team, how progress is going, things like that. So some supports might look, you know, as I'll say small, just because it's not a huge implementation of anything. But for example, an accommodation might be, okay, my kiddo needs like a swivel pad to sit on in class because it helps them concentrate and get some energy out. Or my kiddo needs some noise canceling headphones to help with transitions, things like that. We can also look into any, you know, speech therapy accommodations that might be helpful during the school day, if that is something that the school offers. And, you know, we're looking at accommodations here too, as far as the academic goals that we have. So, you know, these could be, okay, my kiddo needs additional time to complete this assignment, or my kiddo needs to be working one-on-one with a para to complete these sorts of assignments. And those supports obviously could change over time as skills develop, or if we're really struggling in one area or the other. But the school is where your child is spending most of their time. So as much as you can to gain information about what their school day looks like and how they are, if they're struggling, and having communication directly with the teacher as well is going to be extremely important so that you get that insight into how the school day was. Was there something that happened that day, and that's why my kid is crying in the back seat on the drive home? Without that communication, we're really just lost as far as how we can help those kids. So, communication, obviously, and making sure that you're being a really strong advocate for what your kiddo might need. And there's lots of resources for that as well. If you're not sure what your child needs, there's educational advocates. There's other people in the community that can help with that. And that's something that the school should be able to provide you information on as well.
Yeah. So it's really about making their school day as productive and positive as possible. And I love that you mentioned about having it in writing, because I think that's so key. Like, a lot of people will tell me, well, the school's already doing it, right? And that's fantastic. And I love that. But if your school needs to make certain accommodations to your child in order for them to meet these milestones or whatever it is, having it in writing just assures that every year that kid is going to get that accommodation. Because sometimes we all know that we'll have a teacher that's amazing, that is like totally accommodating to our kid. And we just want to write it down so that we are able to keep those resources in place, because you never know what time you're going to change schools. You never know if the next year's teacher is going to be as aware or educated or helpful. And every teacher has different strengths, and that is fantastic. But in order to support our kids, it's really important that we have it written down. And also that way we can lean on it to say, like, hey, we have this goal or we have this accommodation, so that we can get that. And it's not like a special thing, and we've already decided. Yeah. So I love mentioning that. So what can parents do to support their children with autism? What do you think is important for them to do?
Yeah. So I would say there's a couple of things here that I feel like are important. So I think acceptance is a huge thing. Accepting the things about your child that might be different. Accepting that this is our reality, accepting that they want to rewind and play the same clip on YouTube over and over again, accepting these things about the kiddo is going to be not only helpful for the child, but helpful for you. And that leads me into the next thing, with the importance of parents taking care of themselves to help in these situations. So I know that it can be really, really challenging for parents to put aside the needs of all of the people that they help support and help organize and everything in their families in order to focus on themselves. And I completely empathize with that. I will say, however, that your ability to care for your child and your family is so dependent on your ability to have your own needs met and follow through with those things. So I would say, as much as possible, make sure you're taking care of yourself, whether that looks like, taking one day of PTO from work just for yourself, if that means you're in the house and you're cleaning and that feels good for you, or you need to go get a massage or whatever, or seeing your own therapist can be also helpful. And the third thing I would recommend as well is finding other parents who are in similar positions as you, because having that village to help you is going to be so important when things come up that might be stressful, or you see that your kiddo is really, really challenged by something and you need other people around you to help you rally so that you can do what you need to in those situations. And I've worked with various parents over the years who find Facebook groups of other parents of autistic kids and these parents are all across the country. But I have one parent I've worked with in particular who has found people that live 30 minutes from her on these groups. And so they can meet and have coffee. And of course, I know that's not possible everywhere for everybody. However, having these little communities that we can lean on a little bit can be really, really helpful, especially with parents and kids who have already gone through some things that, a specific parent might be going through at that point.
Yeah.
And then I could talk about this for so long, so I'm trying to narrow these things down. The other thing I want to mention too is the importance of continuing to challenge your child. So, many kids, depending on personality, and kids on the spectrum might be very strong-willed or very determined or avoidant or all of these things because there's some fear there or anxiety. And I just want to encourage parents that, yes, we can accept that this is a stressful situation and we're still going to do it. And I'm going to be here to support you, because really building that resilience and grit over time is going to be so helpful for that child when they're an adult and they're able to have a job, or they're in college, or they're learning a trade, or, whatever that might look like. Helping them get through those tough things and having them still complete them is going to be really, really helpful, as long as you're there to be supportive. And I will say that Dr. Temple Grandin has written several books about this specific thing that I'm mentioning. And those are really helpful because she's an autistic person herself. And she talks a lot about things her parents challenged her to do. And if they hadn't, she would not be where she is now, and she would not be as happy and healthy and content as she is now. So, there's tons of resources out there as well, but she's one in particular. I really, really enjoy her honesty and her vigor for, encouraging parents to really, really push and challenge their kids.
Yeah. Well, I think you've mentioned several fantastic things. Like, community is so important. I think just generally as a parent, doesn't matter what you're navigating, having somebody who you can go through that has already done the things, right?
Yeah.
Like, and has some ideas or solutions. It doesn't mean you have to follow them, but just to have some understanding too, right? Like, I know that with my own kids, like sometimes it's like, I'm just frustrated. I just like need somebody to listen to this that isn't going to be like dismissing or playing down what I'm experiencing, but then also might have some advice that could be really helpful. And to say like, hey, we had that same thing and we've gotten through it. Like that, sometimes it's like just knowing that you're going to get through it is amazing, right? There's a book that I have referenced before in my podcast. It's called Going on a Bear Hunt. And there's this part that says, we can't go over it. We can't go under it. We've got to go through it. And I think as a parent, that's something that I am always thinking, like, sometimes I want to fast track it, but we've got to go through it. And then that's what builds this resilience, right? And makes us, our kids and ourselves strong, right? And so, and I think there are some things that are unnecessary to go through that, okay, that's unnecessary, but like, that's part of having the community, right? Like, you don't have to struggle on your own. But you still are going to find a way to navigate through whatever your kid is presenting to you to get to the other side. And a lot of times we're able to successfully get to the other side to be at a better place. And then also I know that for me as a parent, like, it's nice to offer suggestions to other people. So like when I've gone through something and it really worked out well, like I figured it out, it's kind of like, it feels good to be able to help somebody else more quickly, right? So that they don't have to struggle for so long in something where it's like, oh, this like thing that I tried could be great for you. That feels good. So I think it's good on both sides to be there to get the advice, but then also to be able to stick around to give the advice. So I love the Facebook groups too. So lots of great resources, and we'll put those in the show notes. So look for that. So how do you parent a kid with autism? Is there differences? Like, what should we be considering when we think about this diversity?
Sure. So, oh gosh, that's such a great question. In my experience working with families, I think the biggest thing I have learned from them as far as what has been helpful is patience. Patience, and also following through with, whatever a task might be, or, repairing after a tough conversation or an argument. But coming back to patience and love and acceptance, I think are just the biggest things, because there will be, really challenging times like there are with any kiddo and in any relationship, and the ability to come back on the back end and work through like, okay, what was hard about this? What can I do differently next time? Here's what I need you to do differently next time. And let's figure out how to make this feel better for us. So kind of coming back to those three things, and also, kind of looking through the lens of, like we mentioned in the previous episode, I believe, looking through the lens of curiosity and also empathy, not only for your child, but for yourself as the parent.
Mm-hmm.
Noticing like, okay, today sucked, being able to notice that and have those moments of reflection for yourself to just check in and accept that, okay, this was really hard. And also be able to show yourself a little bit of grace to say, okay, it was hard for me. I'm sure it was hard for my kid too. And let's figure this thing out together. I think that, coming back to kind of those core value belief type of things are especially helpful, with
Yeah.
all family relationships, but especially with kids on the spectrum.
That's amazing advice. So maybe that looks like at the end of a hard day, talking to your spouse if you have one, or a family
Mm-hmm.
member who gets autism, or journaling, right? To say like,
Mm-hmm.
these are the things, to put those things down. Cause I think the thought process through that, like just throwing that away, is a missed opportunity. So
Yeah.
I think talking about it, to say like, I could have been more patient here with myself or with my
Mm-hmm.
child, or I could have slowed down. Right. I think
Mm-hmm.
pausing before you respond. I mean, parenting is hard. This
Yeah.
is the hardest journey that
Yeah.
you are going to be on, and the most challenging, I think, is being a parent, because our kids sometimes reflect back at us our exact selves,
Mm-hmm.
which can be very hard. And sometimes they reflect back at us the other person that's contributing to their genetic code. And that can also be hard, right? So
Yeah.
like, it can be like looking in a mirror sometimes, and also like looking at frustrations that we have with that person that is the other genetic contribution
Mm-hmm.
to that part, right? Like a spouse, or previous spouse, and our partner. And so I think that can be hard too, is like that balance. Or
Mm-hmm.
we may never have really had any interaction with autism, right? And
Yeah.
so we just know nothing about this. So taking care of ourselves, educating ourselves, being patient with ourselves, and doing
Mm-hmm.
the same for our kid with autism. Such great advice. Thanks, Keslie. Okay, so what do you think autism looks like into adulthood? What should we have on our mind when we're thinking about this journey of, like, maybe we have a 2-year-old and we're like thinking,
Mm-hmm.
where does this go, or how does this look? And
Right.
mhm,
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, I think what you just mentioned as far as looking ahead, I think is really, really important, especially if we're looking at autistic kids who are going to need really specialized support, or might need, a caregiver or a staff member or someone with them around the clock. Those are things that we need to prepare for as soon as possible. And what that might look like is getting in touch with your local disability organization.
mhm,
Here in Kansas, they're called community developmental disability organizations, and a diagnosis is required to access services they can provide. But once we're able to enter into those services, we have a case manager. We have people who might take our child out into the community to work on social skills. We
mhm,
have the case manager, and those services are kind of the foundation for other services. So, they'll be able to point us in the right direction as far as, okay, my kid is about to graduate high school, and I don't think they'll be able to live totally by themselves, but they don't want to stay at home. How do we figure out how we can make this work?
mhm.
Those case managers are wizards sometimes in figuring those things out. So the sooner we can access those services, the better.
Yeah.
And we need to look too at the financial piece, the real, like, kind of nuts and bolts of what life might look like outside of high school. Where's funding going to come from for my child to have staff around the clock, or be able to go to a day service program, or have a job coach, or go through a vocational rehab. All of those things are available and extremely helpful if we're able to set them up and get on wait lists that are years long to access
Mhm.
these services. So, I've mentioned earlier, asking the question and being the squeaky wheel is going to be, the one of the most important things you can do for your kiddo. And I will say too that I know several autistic adults who work corporate jobs and are married and have kids. I know other autistic adults who use augmentative and alternative communication devices and live in a group home and go on outings and go to day programs and are really happy with their independence. And there's, like we mentioned in the previous episode, a spectrum of these things, obviously. But our ability to push and challenge when we need to is really going to set everybody up for some success moving forward. And I also would mention too, just the importance of including your child in these decisions, because just because our child might not be a verbal communicator does not mean that they don't have desires or wants or goals that they want to meet themselves. So as much as we can have this directed by them, I mean, that's how all of us want to live, right? We don't want to be told what to do necessarily. So as much as we can include them in that and really walk through what things might look like and prepare for those big changes, those things are going to be really helpful.
That's amazing advice. Yeah. I think it's getting the picture, right? Like, I think sometimes when people get the autism diagnosis, they're like, okay, my dreams for my child have been totally ruined or will never happen. And it's like, okay, well, hold on, pause, right? Like, let's sit that to the side. And sometimes we do need to grieve that because that is a reality, is it will be different, but great, just different. Right. And I think it's good to have those supports. So the Facebook pages or local agencies that are there to support your kid are so important. So it's like all about getting the diagnosis early, getting out there, asking the questions, getting resources for your kid, and being part of that process so that we can set those things up so that we're not in desperation. We're not at the end of like graduating high school and being like, oh, shoot. We've got to get some things in place. We already have those supports in place. And hopefully within the school system, they're also pushing this agenda of getting community supports, because sometimes it's the community mental health center that also has supports with case managers and things. And so it's hopefully that's the case. But if they're not, like today, right, as soon as you're able to get out, ask questions, connect with other parents that are in this place, and figure out what resources could be available to your kid. Okay, so we have covered, again, a lot of great information. Thank you, Keslie. But what do you want parents to take away from this? What do you want them to keep on their minds as they navigate this journey with their kids with autism?
So I guess my biggest thing to pass on to parents is just that you guys can handle this. You are fully equipped to manage whatever challenges happen, autism or not. If you're operating from a place of acceptance and empathy and love, that's kind of, where I'm hoping parents can be. And I'm sure there are going to be ups and downs to that. That's life. So I think as much as parents possibly can, be those squeaky wheels, advocate for your kids, and advocate for your kid in ways that your kid might not like. Like, have them try soccer for the recreational league, have them try a cooking class, have them try these little things that, you guys have talked about and maybe your child's nervous about it. Like really, really push them to complete these things as a supportive parent. We're not, we don't want to challenge them and just leave them out there. And that's kind of where it ends. We want to learn from these things. So I think parents, as much as possible, for you to accept and advocate and love on your kid, I think those are going to be the really big takeaways, I guess, from today's episode anyway.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Keslie. All of this has been so insightful.
Thanks.
That was all fantastic information. If you're parenting a kid with autism, I know that you've appreciated what Keslie had to say. And if you're not, you have been enlightened to the challenges of just parenting, but also parenting a kid with autism. I hope that you guys will take away just the self-care that's necessary to be a parent, the compassion, the patience, the awareness, and the advocating that is necessary to be a parent just in general, but especially when you're parenting a kid with a neurodiversity like autism. And with that, I would just want to say, if you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe to our episodes and also share them with your friends. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and also send us emails, request topics. I'm loving all the emails that we're getting because it's giving us more data and I'm getting to find more experts to help you guys with. So please keep those coming. accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Thank you so much for your time today. We're looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.